Hello and welcome. Welcome everybody to our last major session of the day, opportunities and priorities of the community, for the community, and by the community. I am so excited to have you all join us for this, sticking it out with us. This is where we are going to think about actual ideas and how to take action together. This session involves using a Miro board. It is a white space where we can collect all of our ideas using sticky notes and work to collaboratively to think about things. First, I want to say the need to create pathways and improve processes to take action on new insights is an ongoing issue in science communication. We heard a lot about that in the previous session, and of course, who participates in that process really matters. We began SciPEP with this in mind, and we thought we already knew, at least conceptually, what actions were needed for communicating about basic science. We thought it was just creating the training resources for basic scientists. What we learned in the last day and a half is that there's so much more for our community to consider and do. There are more questions than answers, but that means there's lots of opportunity. So let that be our motivation to brainstorm carefully and intentionally about our next steps. But before we get to brainstorming, I'm pleased and excited to introduce Marina Joubert. Marina, please join me on screen. She's going to present an opportunity, one way that we can take action. So over to you, Marina.
Thank you so much, Keegan, for this wonderful and exciting opportunity. I'm going to quickly just get a few slides that I want to share with you today. We've got these two exciting opportunities made possible with support from the Kavli Foundation to take forward all the wonderful ideas and questions and look for answers. It's a special issue of the Journal of Science Communication, as well as a symposium that's going to take place in Stellenbosch, South Africa. Now, both of these will happen next year, but we will start working on them now already, and we invite all of you to join us on these journeys. So the special issue of the Journal of Science Communication, the abstract call is open as of today, and the purpose with this is to really add to the scholarly literature some of the ideas and discussions and research and reflection and practice insights that we are discussing in this space about communicating discovery science. We hope that this special issue will really serve to stimulate interest, to inform training, to provide an evidence base, and also to create connections between theory and practice, between the researchers and the trainers that we discussed earlier today as well. So you see the deadline there. By the 1st of February next year is the close or the deadline for abstracts. So that should give you ample time to submit. And the call is open as of today at the link below. And these slides will obviously be available on the website of the Journal of Science Communication, which is, I should maybe just add as well, a Diamond Open Access journal. So there's no barriers for anybody to be able to publish or to access indeed the contents. Also then, a little bit later next year, towards the end of the year, by the time that this special issue is published in JCOM, we want to convene a symposium in South Africa. It will be in South Africa, and that will give it a different flavor because context really matters, but it is an international symposium. It's not meant to be only for South Africa or only for Sub-Saharan Africa. We really just want to bring it to South Africa to give different audiences and presenters and researchers and students an opportunity to participate in person, but we will also make it possible for people to follow the event online. So all of this will be made more clear. We will call, of course, for abstracts for this symposium as well. So if you're interested and if you would like to be a part of this, I invite you to go and look at this link on the website of the organization where I work, which is Stellenbosch University, where I'm a researcher. But you're also most welcome to just simply email me for more information or for links, both for the special issue of the journal as well as for this symposium that we're going to have in Stellenbosch. And as I was listening the last 2 days, I kept on making notes of all the wonderful ideas emanating from the last 2 days that we can take forward in both of these initiatives. And I really can't wait to embark on this journey with as many as possible of you. And I hope to welcome many of you to Stellenbosch next year. Thank you so much, Keegan.
And thank you, Marina. This is a really exciting opportunity, and I hope that everybody here at this conference will take hold of it. Right now, I'm going to invite 3 rapporteurs, excellent, to join me on stage or on screen. Right now, we have Erika, Shugart, and Daren and Jory, and we're going to chat about some of the things that we're seeing here in this Miro board. But first, I want my excellent rapporteurs to introduce themselves, say who you are, where your professional institution is, and how you relate to taking action. Let's start with Erika.
Sure. Thanks, Keegan. My name is Erika Shugart, and I am the Executive Director and CEO of the National Science Teaching Association. We are an association of over 35,000 members who represent educators in both the formal and informal space, all the way from early childhood to senior citizens. The majority of our members are K-12 educators in the United States, but we do really represent educators of all stripes.
Great. And Daren?
Thank you, Keegan. Happy SciPEP Day 2, everyone. My name is Daren Ragojo Ginete, and I'm an associate advisor at the Science Philanthropy Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization that supports a network of philanthropic funders in their giving to discovery research. And as part of my role, I manage our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Shared Interest Group. Before joining the Alliance, I worked as a basic scientist, having done so in 5 different and diverse institutions across the US. I also have background in educational program development and in healthcare. In fact, previously at the Alliance, I served as our infectious disease fellow and then a civic science fellow. I'm very excited to be here to listen in and reflect in what our collective perceives as opportunities and priorities in this space.
And we are so happy to have you. And last but certainly not least, Jory.
Thank you, Keegan. I'm Jory Weintraub. I am the Director of Science Engagement at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Among other things, my job involves teaching science communication courses for graduate students and undergrads, doing a lot of science communication training for postdocs and faculties and other folks, and generally trying to help scientists, researchers feel more comfortable engaging with various audiences around their research and hopefully getting them to a point where they're not only comfortable doing it, but they enjoy doing it as well. And my background, I've spent most of my career focusing on science communication and science outreach, but I'm a biologist by training, and at various points when I was a biologist, I kind of floated in between basic and applied research, I guess. So
great, thank you, and thank you so much for being here. So what we're going to do, audience, and all of these are our expert rapporteurs. They've been looking through the different ideas, and they're going to help synthesize some of the themes that they're seeing. So I'm going to turn first over to Erika and ask her, what are you sort of seeing in that public section? What's sort of standing out to you in that area as ideas for moving forward?
Sure. So I've been looking both, that sort of gray area for the publics and a little bit over in that basic scientist area as well. But over in the publics area, I've been kind of trying to cluster them a little bit. And I've been seeing some significant clusters, one around kind of how does science affect my everyday life and how can I use it in informed decision making? So I think there's kind of a cluster of ideas that are all around that. There's another cluster of ideas that really focuses on being concerned about whether the public understands. I think it's a mix. Do they understand science? Do they understand scientists? Do they kind of get what's going on? I think the general sense that it is important for people to know about that. And then I think that the other 2 pieces that I saw that were kind of popping out quite a bit were more emotive, which I thought was interesting because I didn't see that in a lot of the other boards. One was about sort of eliciting emotion in these audiences, sort of excitement, joy, hopefulness. I know we've talked a lot about hope over in emotion with the publics, and I think that that's reflected there. And then the last piece that I saw was a sense of belonging. There's several ideas there that we need to make sure that the publics understand that they belong to this process, so they can be a part of this process. There are some specific ideas for sort of how to translate for the public, creating a few things, but most of them were kind of broader conceptual ideas of what we should be doing.
That's great. Thanks, Erika, for sharing that. So it sounds like we need to do some digging in with members of the public, different ways of getting those feelings of what is interesting to them, or how they want to belong, or how they want to participate. Sort of along the lines we were hearing from Chris Volpe yesterday with their broader research study on how publics want to participate. Daren, what are you seeing? Maybe in the relevance and connection space?
Thank you, Keegan. I was looking through the different ideas on that particular area, and I think there's a few things that emerge from my perspective. One is that there's always going to be a need to define the relevance and impact of basic science, because that aspect is a little bit more distant for folks, and there's not an immediate reflection on that connection. I think there's a few ideas actually on the space on how folks would be able to do that. One, highlighting the process of science and the discovery aspect of science. I thought that was particularly intriguing. The other aspect that I want to point out is that instead of focusing on the research aspect, an alternative way to manage relevance and connection is actually focusing on scientists and researchers as people beyond their research work. And I think that was that also ties into a comment on the importance of diversity and tapping into folks with diverse skill sets and knowledge and context and background to facilitate the work moving forward. And so super excited to see what other connections are out there, but those are the ones that stood out to me.
Great, thanks. And Jory, what are you seeing across these boards that you're looking at? Perhaps any specific board?
Yeah, so I was sort of monitoring the training board and the what do basic scientists want or need to communicate and engage effectively. And I jotted down a few notes. I'll start with the yellow one, which is what do basic scientists want or need. A few things leaped out at me. There were several that were clustered together, and I have to confess mine was one of them in this cluster, around the idea of incentivizing science communication and making it really clear to basic scientists why they should do this and why it's important and necessary, but also, change, sort of adapting the promotion and tenure process so that there is a reward structure and the work that they do, the effort they put forth is acknowledged and is valued, and so they feel that there's a proper incentive to do the work. Similarly, another thing that came up in that area was there needs to be more support from the science communication community in terms of making sure that basic scientists have the tools they need to do this effectively, and that they have the support, including access to new developments in science communication research. There was one or two comments in there that I thought were really important about sort of lowering the risk. And this gets back to the point I made earlier about how part of my goal with science communication training is to get scientists to a point where they actually not only are willing to do this, but enjoy doing it. And it becomes something that's an enjoyable process to them. And I think lowering the risk so that they can practice and get feedback and not worry that, as they're learning and improving, that will be a challenge to them is really important. And then the last thing I noticed stood out here that I thought was really important and maybe is often overlooked is to actually ask the scientists themselves what they want and need, and to listen as science communicators and a science communication community, to listen more closely to the scientists to find out how we can better serve them. And I've probably gone over, so I won't go into the training box now. Sorry.
No, all of those thoughts are really great. I was noticing among the themes, like Erika said, a lot of the ideas here are more conceptual than concrete actions. And I'm curious, just from your different perspectives, why do you think it's so hard to think of a concrete action? What makes it difficult for some of these things? Anybody can jump in there.
Well, one thing I would say is there were a few concrete actions, and those tend to be the ones that have a full-on paragraph on the Post-it note. So it may just be, it may not be people's thinking. It may be what they're trying to do, because there were some that were, a little bit more, people referred to their own experience about what they have done. I saw some offers over in the sort of board on the side there, the other board that was capturing people looking for some collaborations. So I think that they may be in there, but I think it may be a little bit of the modality of the approach, but that's just a hypothesis on my part.
Absolutely. No, I definitely see concrete actions too, but some things are just really hard, like to go from conceptual to action. I'm just curious.
If I could jump in and add something to that, Keegan, I think it may be that a challenge is that for those of us who've been in this area for a while and trying to work towards some of these goals, a lot of these concrete actions are things that we we've been trying to do and trying to affect for a while, and we know the reality, which is that it can be challenging. Lack of resources, lack of administrative support, that sort of thing. And on the training board, one of the themes that emerged was a variation of the idea of incorporating science communication training into graduate training in STEM disciplines, or to make it a requirement of all scientists to have that. And this is a soapbox that I've been on for a long time, but it's hard to change when there's all this inertia, and to get people to change the way scientists are trained and incorporate things. So I think there may be a little bit of a acknowledgement on our part that we've tried this stuff and it's just not easy. So that's why it's hard to get concrete actions to take effect.
Right. As it was said, or I think in a session earlier today, we work within systems that work within systems that work within systems, right? So that you have to recognize the ceilings of those various different systems within your frame, and that's challenging. Daren, looks like you were going to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Keegan. I think you briefly touched on what I wanted to say, which is really a systems issue. Like communicating discovery science requires system solutions, and this is not just a one person, one entity, one institution problem. And so I think that's why it's hard, because trying to figure out where all the different directionalities and pressure points exist and where they can be enacted on can be challenging. I think having a forum like SciPEP, where we can have a group of network of us thinking about in the space and understanding what our directionality is moving forward, is super helpful. And so I think I'm not surprised that there's no concrete actions. I think what I'm excited about is that there's a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of passion and desire to change it. And so there's no one action also, right? And so I think we could all do different things, and hopefully at some point we can tip the lever towards our goals for discovery science.
Great, thank you. And then I'm going to ask all of you, and I'm going to ask our audience too. So are there ideas or group of ideas that resonate the most with you personally? Like, what is something you're like, oh, I really love that, and that's something is really meaningful to me where I work, or in the people I work with, or any of did anything emerge like that you're seeing? And the same thing for all of our audiences is, what are the ideas or group ideas that are resonating the most with you, and why? Anybody can go.
Oh, well, one thing I would say is I'm seeing pop up on a number of boards is that sort of scientist communicator connection. So there's a lot of places in multiple boards where they sort of talk about, how do we get communicators connected in with people or how do we get scientists connected in with people that specialize in communication, and that shows up in a lot of different ways. And I think that that's always kind of an interesting question, is how much is it training for the scientist, and how much is it connecting people who are in those boundary spaces between the kind of organizations. And I think that, the pendulum kind of swings back and forth on how much effort is put into those two different groups. I've been in museum, I've been a scientist, I've been in museums, I've been in education, formal, I've kind of been in a bunch of spaces. So I've seen it move around where there's more emphasis on different parts. And I think sometimes maybe we need to think a little bit more about how we put the groups together so they actually leverage each other more. And that's some of those partnerships with like community groups, partnership with groups that already have relationships with audiences. And I do think that that's something that comes up over and over and over again, and yet still remains, I think, something that gets rediscovered quite often.
Yeah. Thoughts, Daren or Jory?
I'll briefly say that one of the things that are, again, going back to my previous comment about having SciPEP as a network, I think there's a lot of desire for people for spaces and understanding what spaces and structures can exist to know that you're not the only one actually doing the work. There's a lot of other people that are also interested in doing the work, but might not be upfront for the current systems or incentives that exist within that structure that you're working on. And so I think the need to have those spaces is standing out to me as a fantastic way to facilitate the work moving forward. May it be training, having different departments, having conferences such as this one. And so just I think that I would want to highlight again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add, because I sort of alluded to it earlier, but a lot of people express this idea that science communication training needs to be a part of the process of preparing scientists, and I just think it's something that a lot of us agree on and have been pushing for. And I think while there are obstacles to making it happen, I think over the years that I've been doing this, I've started to see a shift, and more administrations are starting to acknowledge that. So I think it's moving in the right direction, and we need to be patient, but also keep pushing for that.
Absolutely. I see one idea here in training that just really intrigues me, and I would love your thoughts on this. And this is sort of like a shovel-ready brainstorming type of thing, which is find more concrete examples of what relevance as connection can look like for basic science. And that seems like an achievable, tangible to me. Any thoughts on what that might look like? How to do that?
Well, that was another one of the notes that I jotted down for that section. I thought that was an interesting comment as well. And I think conferences like SciPEP and the organization that's been mentioned before, the scicomm Trainers Network, I think we're starting to see a coalescing of this community a little bit more. And again, sometimes, you get a little impatient and you want progress to happen a little more quickly than it can happen. But I think the community is coalescing and growing. And as we move towards a more cohesive community, we will have the resources to be able to assemble these types of concrete examples and have a central repository for them. So I think if we prioritize that, that's something that can build over time. Clearly, there's a lot of interest based on the participation in this conference and the active participation in SciComm Trainers Network. So I think we're, again, moving in the right direction. Need to be maybe a little patient, but keep pushing.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts there? Perhaps not.
I mean, one thing I'd say on that area is I think that, and I don't know the literature that well, some people can correct me in the comments, but I think that some of that has been documented more for the public. So we know about citizen science or people's participatory science. So we have that. I think it's much less documented in how it necessarily benefits scientists. And I noticed there was one down in what do basic scientists want or need. There was a post-it there that says opportunities may arise from sharing your work with the public, like it might with networking. And I think that idea, I recall when I was at the American Society for Cell Biology, hearing a scientist talk about a thing that they were doing in prisons. They were going into prisons to do to help people that were incarcerated learn about science. But one of the areas was the prisoners actually coming up with one of the classes that they wanted to learn. And the questions they asked resulted in research questions. So it was a change for the researchers. So I think we sometimes often document how we're changing the public, but less so. And I know there's some literature. I know some of the folks on this meeting have documented that, but how the change is also occurring in the scientists, I think might be of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. Write it down. So I see people are still moving around the boards a little bit. Do you have anything else that came to mind as we're going through this exercise? I'd love to go like a round robin here of things that, you're observing across the conference that sort of fits, right here in this discussion we're having about different concrete ideas of moving forward. I know a big theme in this conference has been articulating our value space, basic or applied? Is that a value that we push forward? It's certainly the system in which we work in terms of funding for research, but is that the value we push forward, this focus on basic science communication and then concrete ideas on what that means as we go through research or community conversations or reaching out to the publics about how they want to connect?
Keegan, I'll jump in and say that one of the things that I've been reflecting on is my journey as a scientist, actually. And so, I'm a basic scientist. I'm a discovery science. However, I was trying to figure out if I started that way, even, right? And so maybe as I ventured into research, what really excited me at the initial stages is the impact aspect. And as I progressed a little bit, I leaned more on the discovery aspect, which I really enjoy. And so, maybe we don't have to choose one or the other at the immediate stage. Maybe it can be a process. And I think that understanding might also benefit a lot of audience members where, maybe at first they are more on the impact end, but it's really to journey into the discovery side and be like, oh, this is actually cool in itself as well. And so I think that's the part that I've been reflecting a lot and as part of this conversation.
One of the things I really appreciate about SciPEP is it does draw together people from a lot of different areas. In my career, I've bounced around across a lot of different fields. So I've often seen that people are talking about the same thing in different fields, just using different terms of art. And I think that one of the real strengths of SciPEP in the way, I'm always learning because you bring in people from PR and scicomm and scientists and just a lot of reflection. I'm always like, oh, okay, yeah, that puts a name on this thing that I've sort of seen over in education. So I do think that continuing to think about how do we draw connections, because I think there's a lot of learning that we still haven't even unpacked. And this field has progressed a lot. The field of science communication has come a very long way in the last decade, last 20 years. But I do think that there are still untapped resources that could actually accelerate the field even further that are probably over in like formal education work and probably some of the other areas of psychology.
And so would like a concrete action be sort of the creation of these different partnerships? SciPEP is a memorandum of understanding between Kavli and DOE that has, is a time limit. So we are where we are from that partnership from the last 3 years, but it seems like going forward into the future, perhaps there's room or encouragement somehow. How do we, get that encouragement for other partnerships so that you're bringing in those diverse communities together to have these conversations?
Well, I'll just do a big shout out to the association space since I've been in it for the last 20 years. And it was brought up earlier as well. So professional societies, professional associations often gather people, and a lot of those associations are now doing things in which they're collaborating with each other, including around science communication. And these efforts have kind of had its fits and starts, admittedly, but I do think that there's still some potential there. But perhaps we don't have all the right partners in the room yet.
Great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to the last of you to see if you have any final comments about all of these considerations and concrete actions. What is it you would want all of the people listening in today to take away from this exercise? You can take a moment to think.
Well, I'm going to take a step back a little bit. This exercise is part of the answer, but I just want to point out an observation that I've made. And unfortunately, I've had to sort of jump in and out of sessions over the last 2 days because of other obligations. But one of the things that I noticed and that has stood out to me about this conference that I think is really cool is that there have been voices at all different levels. And this hasn't been like a lot of the conferences you attend where it's the same old dogs that are on all the panels and sharing all the same ideas. And I've loved to see that there have been grad students at different phases of their graduate careers, and people, earlier career who've been included on the panels. And I think if we really want to make progress in this area, that's an important piece of it, is to continue hearing from all voices, including people who are earlier in their careers and have different perspectives. So I've just been really impressed and pleased to see hear the contributions of people at all different stages of their careers over the last 2 days.
That's great. Thoughts from you, Daren?
I think for me, what I want the participants and audience to take away is just that there is a community out there who have aligned goals and values and interests. You are not alone. We are all together in this space. And so how do we keep connecting with each other? And so I encourage you to, keep connecting with people whose comments you've been seeing in the chat, or people who are part of the panelists also. I think understanding that there's a community out there to facilitate the work moving forward will just keep the momentum going. And then I'll also say, from a funder's perspective, there's a lot of conversations I've been hearing about institutional changes and systemic change. And so super excited to keep the work moving in that space for discovery science sake.
Wonderful. Erika.
Yeah. Well, I was involved in the first SciPEP conference, and it was amazing. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and we had way more people show up than I think we ever thought we would. An amazing conversation. And now we hear, 2 years later? And even though most people are kind of like getting a little done with the virtual conferences, there's still an amazing turnout, tons of participation on the board. There's clearly a huge hunger and excitement out there for this kind of research. And I think it is because of the real thoughtfulness about how this has been put together. SciPEP overall has really moved the field by helping to consolidate, I think, information, do some new research, but also kind of consolidate a lot of thoughts in a really smart way that kind of helps pull together things that maybe and refine information in ways that I think helps move the field forward. And I would just say that it's been a delight to see kind of where everything has moved and all of the new papers and all of the new thinking that's come out. And I do know that a lot of times doing this work, particularly if you are a basic researcher sitting in an institute somewhere and you're the only one in your lab that's into this stuff, it can feel really lonely. So hopefully those folks that hadn't found a community before now realize that they're really surrounded by a passionate collective that really wants to help them succeed.
And that is a really positive, uplifting note from the three of you to end this session on and give everybody an opportunity to do a little stretch. We have one final session coming up. Before we get there, I do want to remind everybody, check out the opportunity that Marina Joubert discussed with the Journal of Science Communication. They're looking for a lot of different kinds of submissions, not just research submissions. So much of what we were talking about here, about how there is a community, there's an uplifting movement to move forward and a desire for collaboration and creativity in how we talk about discovery science. This is the special issue title. Please check out that again. And thank you, Erika, Daren, and Jory, for joining us for this rapporteur session. It was excellent. And I hope everybody will join us back in the next section. We have some final thoughts and final goodies, maybe, perhaps, to leave with all of you. So thank you again, and bye.